Hello and welcome to the Temple Mount Podcast. I am Shogun. Today we're going to talk about Bushido. The word Bushi means warrior and Do means way or path. So Bushido means the way or path of the warrior. And this entails essentially the moral code, philosophy, and lifestyle of the samurai caste. But really, samurai is kind of a misnomer. We think samurai are the warrior caste of Japan, but actually a lot of samurai were not warriors because it was sort of like an inherited caste and not all of them actually fought. So Bushi was actually the word for someone who was a real warrior, not just an hereditary samurai. And so that's why it's called Bushido, the way of the warrior. I try and follow it, and I want to talk about it today. And we're also going to talk about my two favorite books, The Book of Five Rings by the greatest swordsman who ever lived, Miyamoto Musashi. They call him the Sword Saint of Japan. He won 65 one-on-one sword duels to the death, which is more than twice what anyone else in history has done. And we're also going to talk about The Art of War by Sun Tzu, who's generally considered one of the greatest masters of the art of war in generalship to ever live, if not the greatest master. And it's going to be really interesting. But before we get started, make sure you join the Temple Mount Discord server. We record this podcast every day, often at about 9 p.m. Central, as well as other times. And we're doing like a blitzkrieg of events over the next 2 days, today as well as the following 2 days, the weekend. So make sure you look at the announcements channel because we're doing like 4 events a day and you're not going to want to miss them. And since you probably did miss some of them, please make sure you subscribe to the Temple Mount official podcast so that you can listen to all our great episodes, and we're updating new ones every day. So make sure you subscribe. Thank you so much. So that being said, we're going to start with a general overview of what Bushido is. Bushido consists of 7 core virtues, right? And I'm going to make sure. So the first and the core one of warrior is honor. So a warrior's code is based on honor, and this is sort of what differentiates warriors from regular people, to be perfectly honest. Because regular people don't really concern themselves with the concept of honor. For most people, their moral code is to be a nice or good person, right? They're just like, I'm a good person because I'm nice to people. I'm a good person because I don't hurt people. I'm a good person because I'm friendly or I'm polite or I'm kind, right? And you should be all those things. And for most people, that's all that's required. So it's important to remember, like, what is a warrior? It's like a caste or a class. Most people are not necessarily warriors, and most people, it's not necessary for them to be warriors. Not everyone's cut out for it, and not everyone wants to be one, and not everyone can be one. So there's other classes like the merchant class, whose job is to make money, or the householder class, whose job is to, raise a family, and that's perfectly fine. Warriors exist to defend those people, among other things. So for a normal person, all that's required to be a morally good person is what is called benevolence, which is part of Bushido as well. Benevolence just means wanting what is good for others, not wanting what is bad for others, wanting compassion, not wanting to be sadistic or cruel. However, for a warrior, that is only the beginning, and the core then becomes honor. So we're going to read a little bit about what honor entails, and honor is essentially the core virtue of a warrior. So it says here, warriors have only one judge of honor and character, and this is themselves. Decisions they make and how these decisions are carried out is a reflection of whom they truly are. Now, in order to understand what honor is, I would almost say the following virtues explain honor. So honor is kind of the overall concept of Bushido, and to understand more about what honor is, well, the other virtues, I'll just read them out, are respect, integrity. It says here heroic courage, but I would just say courage. Honesty and sincerity, duty and loyalty and compassion. You can break this down a few different ways. So I'm going to read this synopsis, and then I'm going to give my own breakdown. So true warriors have no reason to be cruel. They do not need to prove their strength. I actually don't agree with that. Warriors are courteous even to their enemies. Warriors are not only respected for their strength in battle, but also their dealings with others. Integrity. Be acutely honest throughout your dealings with all people. Believe in justice not from other people, but from yourself. To the true warrior, all points of view are deeply considered regarding honesty, justice, and integrity. Heroic courage. This is actually kind of like a cheesy breakdown. I didn't read it. There's usually a different one that's better than this, but I'll read it anyway. Hiding like a turtle in a shell is not living at all. A true warrior must have heroic courage. It is absolutely risky. It is living life completely, fully, and wonderfully. This is kind of like a corny take on this, but sincerity and honesty. When warriors say that they will perform an action, it is as good as done. Nothing will stop them from completing what they say they will do. They do not have to give their word. They do not have to promise. Their word is their bond. Duty and loyalty. Warriors are responsible for everything that they have done and everything that they have said and all the consequences that follow. They are immensely loyal to all those in their care. And finally, compassion. Through intense training and hard work, the true warrior becomes quick and strong. They are not as most people. They develop a power that must be used for good. They have compassion. They help their fellow man at every opportunity. So again, I would have described this differently, and I will describe it differently, but it's not incorrect as far as it goes. So honor is the concept of a jacket. That's what I like to explain it. When you follow an honor code, you have what's called a jacket. So police officers have a jacket, soldiers have a jacket, and martial artists have a jacket. And first of all, I should explain, what is a warrior? Well, in order to qualify as a warrior, you must be a skilled fighter or soldier or fighter, or it can be said soldier or martial artist. So a warrior is either a skilled soldier or a skilled martial artist, or both. If you're not a soldier or martial artist, you can be metaphorically a warrior. You can still embody and incorporate these virtues and values into your life. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about, because these are good for everybody to follow. But you're not actually a warrior if you're not a skilled soldier or fighter. Now, nevertheless, what does it mean to say a jacket? Well, what that means is when you become a warrior, because you're not born a warrior, you must choose to be a warrior, and you can't just choose to be a warrior. You can't just call yourself a warrior and be a warrior. You have to earn that, and you have to be initiated into that, and you have to prove yourself, and you have to actually, warriors are made, right? You have to be forged into a warrior through the practice of training, competition, hardship, and conditioning, and all the other things that make you stronger and build the martial qualities in the martial arts and in combat in general. So once you become a warrior, even when you just begin that path, you have what's called a jacket. And from that point on, everything you do and everything you say and all of your conduct is attached permanently to your jacket. So if you're a police officer, you want to keep your jacket clean. If you're corrupt, if you're ever caught taking a bribe or being involved in any kind of corruption, then that's something that's permanently on your jacket. Your jacket is now tainted. If you're a martial artist and you cheat in competition, you're caught doing, dishonorable techniques, or being a bad training partner, or disrespecting your coach, or disrespecting your gym, or being disloyal to your team, or anything of that kind, then that stains your jacket. So the jacket is like you're the integrity of your honor, and soldiers have one as well, and you'll have that for your entire career. So to just talk quickly about this, I became a warrior when I was 14 years old, and the person that I owe that to was a woman named Shireen Razak. Shireen Razak was an Egyptian judoka and Olympian, Egyptian-Canadian, so Canadian nationality, Egyptian ethnicity, born in Egypt. Migrated to Canada. She won, I think, bronze medal in the Olympics in judo, which is no joke at all, especially because she's from Egypt. And obviously countries like Japan massively dominate in judo. So she was a warrior. She absolutely embodied, and I'm sure still does embody, all the qualities of Bushido. She was a real Bushi, and I was so blessed that she was my coach, because she made me a warrior. I just went in there oh, this will be cool, I want to train, totally casual, pothead, laid back guy. And she's like, well, you have to compete. And I was like, I don't want to compete. And she's like, well, this is a competition gym. If you're not here to compete, you have to leave. You can't train with us if you're not going to compete. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of harsh. I don't want to compete. But fortunately, she forced me into it at the age of 14, and I started competing in judo at that age. And so you get a gi, right? I mean, I have my gi nearby. It's right over there. I actually have 3 gis. Those are the martial arts outfit, but that's your jacket. That's the physical outfit that you wear whenever you go into the gym, whenever you train, whenever you step onto the mat. And of course, it comes with a belt, and it's a thick karate outfit. But the jacket is not the physical garment. The jacket is your reputation. But as soon as you put it on, it's crazy. You feel like a different person. You conduct yourself in a different way. You hold your back straight. You hold your head up. You hold your shoulders back. And there's a whole culture that goes around it. So every time you step into the gym, you bow as soon as you step into the door to show respect to the whole gym. Every time you step onto the mat, you bow to show respect to the gym and your training partners. Every time you're about to fight, you bow. Every time you finish a fight, you bow. In fact, in judo, you bow twice. There's a square. You come to the outside of the square and you bow before you even step into the square. And then you bow again before you fight your opponent, and you bow again after the opponent. So there's a lot of bowing, and this is respect, right? That's one of the core parts of Bushido, is respect. And one of the best ways to show respect is by bowing. If you bow to someone, you've shown them respect. And when you're doing martial arts with training partners, respect is insanely important, because once you become a warrior, not only must you show people respect, but you actually demand that you be respected. And that's one of the things that differentiates warriors from ordinary people. A warrior will not allow himself to be disrespected, because to disrespect someone is to dishonor someone, and your honor is your life. So Miyamoto Musashi says, you may forfeit your body. You can surrender your body, but you can never surrender your honor. So in a warrior code, it's okay to die. It's okay. often necessary to lay down your life, but you can never under any circumstances dishonor yourself. And that also means you cannot allow someone to dishonor you. So this is why this comes with like a lot of responsibility, because it's actually kind of dangerous to be a warrior, because if you're a warrior, you're not necessarily going to let someone disrespect you. And so you might actually have to do something, and that can be dangerous, which is obviously one of the reasons why you have to do an enormous amount of training. So, you know, I'm going to read a little bit from Miyoto Musashi, because he's called the Sword Saint of Japan. He's the greatest martial artist, really, that ever lived. Certainly the greatest swordsman to ever live. I'll have to do a whole podcast about him because he's insanely fascinating. And I'm not like his whole biography and life story is incredible. He's the only person in history to master the art of wielding two katanas at the same time. So a katana is a two-handed longsword. Japanese longsword is intended to be used with two hands on the sword. Somehow he figured out how to fight with one in both hands, and he was completely unbeatable. They call him the Sword Saint of Japan because his abilities were virtually supernatural. But not only that, he was a brilliant poet, a philosopher, a Buddhist, and interestingly enough, he was a Ronin, which means a masterless samurai. And technically to be a Ronin is like the worst possible thing for a samurai, because it's like the whole point of being as a samurai is to have a shogun, to have someone that you pledge your honor to, just like a knight pledges his fealty to a lord. A samurai pledges his fealty not actually to a shogun, but to something called a daimyo, which is like it's an intermediary rank between a regular samurai and a shogun, and then a shogun is an overall warlord. But ultimately, you owe your fealty to a shogun. Regardless, Miyamoto Musashi wrote my favorite book, The Book of Five Rings. I have it here. I'll show you. So I keep this in my backpack at all times. It says, The Book of Five Rings, a classic text on the Japanese way of the sword. And I also have my other book, The Art of War. But regardless, I'm not going to read directly from the book. I'm going to read from the Bushido channel. So, first of all, Miyamoto Musashi says, generally speaking, the way of the warrior is the resolute acceptance of death. So what does that mean exactly? Well, the difference between most people and a warrior is that a warrior necessarily must have made peace with his death, his mortality, and not only that you will die, but you are to perceive yourself as though you are already dead. So one of my favorite images, which I don't have time to bring up in post right now, but I will later, it's a skeleton wearing a suit of armor, like a Japanese samurai armor, and inside the armor is a skeleton. That is sort of my spiritual concept, and that's the concept of Bushido. The armor represents your honor. It's rigid, it's set in place, it cannot be changed, like it is what it is. Your honor code is your honor code. It defines the outlines of your body. You do what your honor dictates. That is defining the outline of your possible behavior. What you do is what is honorable. What do you do? What is honorable? What do you not do? What is dishonorable? This is one of the reasons why Bushido is such a wonderful code, because it removes any ambiguity or uncertainty from life. It removes the way that people will try to manipulate you using your emotions, right? They'll try and play on your friendships. You know, they'll try and ingratiate themselves to you. They'll try and be like, oh, but you love me, you have to do this and that. And we're going to talk specifically about one of Musashi's concepts called Dakato, which is the way of walking alone. But before we get into that and why that's important, normal people, they have this whole like web of security blankets around themselves. Like, I have family, I have friends, I have money, I have reputation, I have a career, I have property, and all of those things give them a sense of security. But it's also a sense of fear and a sense of bondage, because your sense of security is defined by all these things that you put around yourself to distance yourself from the reality of your own death and the fragility of your own body. So you feel comfortable because you live in a big house with a security system, and you've got airbags in your car, and you got medicine and doctors, and so you feel safe. Warriors don't want to feel safe. Warriors want to believe and act as though they are already dead, because once you've accepted that you're already dead, you no longer fear death. And if you fear death, you cannot be an effective warrior, because when you fear death, you will hesitate. And if you hesitate even for a second in a sword fight or a gunfight or any kind of combat, you are lost. He who hesitates is lost. And so in order to execute perfectly a sword strike, you must not have that instant of hesitation that comes from fear of death. So going back to the quotes, this is an interesting and beautiful one, really. Well, so first of all, Musashi said, the only reason a warrior is alive is to fight, and the only reason a warrior fights is to win. Otherwise, why be a warrior? It is easier to count beads. So counting beads is a reference to like Buddhist monks who would have a mala and they just chant mantras, and that was their way of enlightenment. Well, they called Musashi the sword saint of Japan, right? Saint is like a religious term because he says true fencing, and fencing is swordsmanship. He says it's not just a way of fighting. He said it must be a way to salvation, right? Ultimately, if you want to be the elite, you don't fight just to fight. You fight as a path. That's why it's a path like meditation or religion or spirituality. It's a path to enlightenment. It's a path to salvation, but it's a very unique path to salvation. And anyways, he says, under the sword raised high, you have hell making you tremble, but go forward and you have the land of bliss. And so what he's talking about here is when you're preparing to engage in combat, you will feel fear, like everyone does. UFC fighters do, champions do. Before you compete, you will feel fear. But once you get past that movement and you engage, then you're in this like paradise of bliss that comes from combat. And I can speak personally that combat is the most euphoric thing that I've ever experienced. It's more euphoric than sex. It's more euphoric than drugs. And not even just victory, like just combat itself. And then if you actually win, it's like infinitely more. But just fighting is the best thing that there is. It's the best feeling that I've ever experienced. And that's a true fact. And I'm not the only one who feels that way. We had a big debate in the gym one time about what's better, sex or fighting. And about half the people said sex and about half the people said fighting. But for many reasons, it's very enjoyable. But again, the point is it's not about just being enjoyable. It's a path to enlightenment. So Miyamoto Musashi said, the path that leads to the truth is littered with the bodies of the ignorant. The path that leads to the truth is littered with the bodies of the ignorant, especially if the path is the warrior path, because, you know, in a martial arts fight, if you lose, you're not likely to die. In the fights that Musashi was having that he won over 65 of, every one of those was a life and death duel. He killed 65 people in one-on-one sword fights, and had he lost even one of those matches, that's the end. That's game over. But he managed to win and actually like go on to become like a Buddhist monk and write books and stuff. So obviously a lot of people who tried to follow the same path died. But the point here is not just that it's dangerous. The point is that you must approach the path with the correct attitude of Bushido to avoid being one of these bodies of the ignorant. Now, this is my favorite quote, and I use this quote all the time, and it comes in relevance all the time in the server. Truth is not what you want it to be. It is what it is, and you must bend to its power or live a lie. If you only take one thing away from this podcast, try to really integrate this. Truth is not what you want it to be. It is what it is, and you must bend to its power or live a lie. This is one of the reasons why I love Bushido and fighting so much, because fighting is pure honesty. There is no lies in fighting. There's deception, right? You trick your opponent, you feint, you make him think you're doing one thing and you do the other, but there's no lies. That's why it's so refreshing. So online on Discord, people will lie all the time, and they'll try to make the truth what they want it to be, right? I hate to use a personal example, but like, you know, Crimson recently said, like, well, you promised us that you were going to share all the power in the server. No, I said the exact opposite. I said I was never going to share the power in the server, and I was always going to be the Grand Master. There's going to be no dispute whatsoever about who controlled the server. But Crimson didn't want that to be the truth. So he said, well, you promised us that you were going to share the power. I never said anything with the sword, right? Tech, same thing. He said, like, I made the server. Well, no, I made the server. The truth is not what you want it to be. It is what it is. Now, in martial arts, the reason it's so refreshing is you don't have that option of lying. If someone gets you in an armbar, you can't say, you don't have me in an armbar. No, you totally don't. No, your arm breaks, right? There's no room for dispute. You can't say, no, you don't have me in a choke. You get choked out, you die. You can't say, I won the fight if you're lying on the ground dead. So it's the only domain of life that's purely honest. That's pure truth. Like the truth is evident within it. And that's the other reason why I love being a warrior, because it's the only domain in which you simply take respect. So in other domains, you have to either try and earn respect like someone like Crimson does by ingratiating yourself and like, you know, making friends by pleasing people and telling them what they want to hear. That's one way. Or you raise money and you make money and you have to work for it and do things for it to get it. And then you might get respect, or maybe you can accomplish things and get respect. These are the ways people get respect. And even then you might not be given respect. People might disrespect you even when you deserve respect. But in martial arts, you don't need the other person's consent. You take respect, right? It doesn't matter. If the opponent steps up and they disrespect you, so much the better, because then they're going to underestimate you and they're going to do even more poorly in the competition. Because, of course, rule number one of combat, don't underestimate your opponent, which is another way of saying respect your opponent. Not only respect him as a martial artist to a martial artist, because maybe it's not a martial artist. Maybe you're fighting a rapist or a murderer or a psychopath, someone who you don't respect in the same way that you respect a fellow training partner. But what you have to respect is the danger that they represent, the abilities that they have. So if someone is strong, you have to respect their power. someone is fast, you have to respect their speed. To not respect it is meaningless. You will respect it when you feel it, right? You say, I don't respect your power. Well, you will when you feel it, right? There's no two ways about it. And someone can have a cocky attitude, but at the end of the fight, you can humble them. You can prove that you are the better man. And that's a very addictive thing. And when I say better man, there's a caveat. It doesn't mean you're necessarily morally better, but you were the better fighter that day. Nobody can dispute it. Unless, of course, it goes to the judges' scorecards in like MMA. And then there's some dispute. But anyways, returning now to a few quotes to guide the conversation. I'm sorry, I'll try to turn my phone again. So let's just go through it in order, because all of this is pure gold. This is the thing that's amazing about both Sun Tzu and Miyamoto Musashi. Every single stroke of the pen that these guys put to paper is not wasted. Just like in a sword fight, they don't waste a single stroke. In writing, they don't waste a single stroke. So, like, for example, The Art of War, and I'm kind of jumping around because I'm enthusiastic about this and I'm all over the place, but every chapter of The Art of War is generally just one sentence. And Sun Tzu, they call him Master Sun. And every chapter is just one sentence. And yet you could read those sentences every day for the rest of your life and never stop getting more meaning out of it. And then each sentence that he writes, there's 10 other brilliant generals through history, some of the greatest generals in Japanese history, and each of them gives their commentary. So Master Sun just says one sentence, and then 10 different generals give a commentary on that one sentence, and that's the structure of the book. The point is, there's no wasted words, and there are no words that are not incredibly profound. And the way I've heard it explained is like if you read a normal book, you read it once and you get the value out of that book, like a fiction book. But these books, they're not like that. You read them over and over again. They're like guides to life that just never run out. So I mentioned how good these guys are at writing, and this is actually specific. So Miyamoto Musashi said, "It is said that the warriors is the twofold way of pen and sword, and he should have a taste for both ways." So people don't usually think of this, but a warrior must also be a master of the pen. You've heard the expression, the pen is mightier than the sword. Depends on the context. But the point is, to be a true warrior, you have to be able to use your words as effectively or more effectively as a weapon as your sword or your hands. And they go hand in hand. So that's why a true warrior should be also skilled with his words, both written and spoken. Miyamoto Musashi said, "Like a sword, a word can wound or kill. But as long as one does not touch the blade, the sword is no more than a smooth piece of metal. Someone who knows the qualities of a sword does not play with it, and someone who knows the nature of words does not play with them." So this ties back to honesty and integrity and honor. A major part of honor is being impeccable with your word, which means if you say you're going to do something, you do it. You don't lie about others. You don't lie about yourself. You don't exaggerate your achievements. You don't say other people did bad things they didn't do, which is called slander. You don't exaggerate your own accomplishments. It's about honesty. What you say must be true. And why is that so important? Well, think about it. If you're a warrior, no one man can survive alone as a warrior. Miyamoto Musashi says, if you master the way of the sword, one man can defeat 10, right? And that's true. And therefore 100 men can defeat 1,000. However, no one man on his own can defeat an army or a group of people. You rely on your comrades in arms for war. You need teammates, soldiers, whatever, allies. So if you're not impeccable with your word, nobody is going to commit themselves to you to the extent of fighting alongside you and dying alongside you. So let's say you say, hey, we're going to fight the enemy tomorrow. We're all going to meet here and ambush them, or we're going to meet them on the field of battle, and they don't show up and you're the only one who shows up. Right? It's very important that you honor your word. They need to know that you're going to be where you say you're going to be. If you say you're going to leave a sword for them or bring money for them, you have to do it. It's a matter of life and death. And it's the boy who cried wolf. Like every truth you tell, your reputation increases as an honest person. But it only takes one lie to completely destroy your reputation forever. So if you tell 100 truths and then one lie, now you're a liar. There's a joke, which I shouldn't really say, but it says you can build 100 bridges, nobody calls you a bridge builder. You can dig 100 holes and nobody calls you a hole digger, but you fuck one goat and everyone calls you a goat fucker. Well, in the same way, you tell one truth, people don't call you a truth teller, but you tell one lie, people will always remember you as a liar. So it's never worth it to lie. Right now, again, there's caveats to this because part of being a warrior is also intelligence, counterintelligence, and obviously if you're a spy, or you're engaged in deception, which is the essence of warfare. Sun Tzu said all war is deception. The essence of warfare is deception. Then yes, of course you lie in that context of being a spy. But when you're a warrior, your word is your bond, your honor is your life, your honor is your word. So integrity, honesty, loyalty, respect. You must command people's respect. People don't respect liars, and people are not loyal to people they don't respect. So if you want people to be loyal to you, you must earn their respect. And if you want to earn their respect, you must be honest and truthful, including admitting when you make mistakes, including admitting when you have faults and failings, including admitting when you are not perfect. You must be honest about those things to other people and to yourself. If you're not honest about those things with yourself, you can't improve them. You can't improve on flaws. So if you tell yourself, my kicking technique is perfect, my armbar is perfect, you're lying to yourself, you're not going to get any better. You have to always approach things as a continuous student. And that is why one thing that really should be on the virtues of Bushido, but technically isn't, is humility. So, the whole belt thing is a test, just like in the server, rank, like it goes to some people's heads and makes them arrogant, which actually makes them less effective. So humility is always the key. Like you meet people who are not willing to accept that they're white belts, and they think that they don't want to start at white belt. They want to jump right to blue or black. That just tells you right there, you're not even on the path of the warrior. The very beginning of the path of the warrior is putting on your white belt, which is symbolically recognizing that you know nothing. You're here to learn, right? Some people can't make that first step. The more humble you are, the more you're going to learn. The more you learn, the more quickly that you will advance. So anyways, Miyamoto Musashi said, in all forms of strategy, it is necessary to maintain the combat stance in everyday life and to make your everyday stance your combat stance. What that means is you should never see combat as something separate from ordinary life. You shouldn't say, okay, I go to the gym and I fight, and then I go home and I relax. Another thing that he said is live as though every day as though you were on the battlefield, and you will become strong. In other words, there is no differentiation for a warrior between war and peace. You are always in a perpetual state of war. Everything is always war at all times. Life is war at all times. You should act accordingly. So when you're at war, what do? You're careful about everything, right? You're diligent, you're vigilant, you're training constantly, you're considering your ammunition, your supplies, your food, your water, you're looking out for your friends, you're conducting yourself with integrity because everybody's life is on the line. Well, everybody's life is always on the line, and you never know what your enemies are doing. They don't tell you when they're planning to attack you. They attack out of nowhere by surprise. Therefore, if you're ever under the impression that it's peacetime, you're just being vulnerable. There is no peacetime, right? There's only war, and any downtime in war is for training and preparation for war, which is also part of war. Therefore, you should behave at all times as though you were at war, and therefore you will become strong. You can't be a part-time warrior. A warrior is not something you do. A warrior is something you are. It's your identity. And people have multiple levels of identity, right? You can be a brother, a father, a lover, a boyfriend, a friend, a teacher. But if you're a warrior, that is automatically your highest identity. It supersedes, and it's your core and superseding identity. This is why Dakato becomes so important. And again, Dakato is the way of walking alone, which is part of Bushido. Well, why walking alone, right? It says never do anything motivated by lust or love. Never be saddened by a separation. Why walking alone? Well, because people who are householders, right? I was married for 12 years, and I was completely loyal and in love with my wife. So she was always my number one consideration. This is a big problem for a warrior, though, because if there's a war to be fought, you're going to be torn, emotionally torn between wanting to be with your wife, wanting to protect her, wanting to not be separated from her, and the fact that you might have to go to war and die and never see her again. Or you might have to not be there to protect your children because you're on the front lines with your brothers in arms fighting and dying. So this is why if you're going to be a warrior, you should try to accept, or necessarily must accept, a total lone wolf personality. Like, you're not attached to anybody. You can have allies, you can have friends, but these are just temporary conditions, because at any time you might have to say, hey, your orders say you're going there, my orders say I'm going there. You might love your brother with all your heart. You've been fighting together. He saved your life 10 times. You've saved his life 10 times. You get your orders. He's deployed to the Eastern Front. You're deployed to the Western Front. You can't cry about it. You can't be sad. You shake hands. You go your way. You do your duty. So this emotionality, this sentimentality, this attachment that ordinary people have, like, oh, we're friends, we can never separate, or, oh, this is my wife, I couldn't live without her, even, oh, this is my child, she's my everything. For a warrior, these are all incompatible with duty. Like, duty is honor, honor is duty, only in death does duty end. So it's going to be enormously easier for you emotionally, psychologically, and strategically to have no such attachments. Furthermore, your enemies can use these things against you. So many men are willing to die. Many men have made peace with their death. Not most, but there are many warriors who are capable of facing death. They're that courageous. Not that many people are willing to see their families tortured. Not that many people are willing to see their daughter killed or kidnapped. And so then that can cause you to violate your honor or betray your friends, betray your cause if someone has threats or blackmail over you or your family. So again, in order to have no attachments other than your attachment to honor, honor is the only thing you should be attached to. And it's much easier to accomplish that if you never have the family. Now, it doesn't say you can't get married. It says never do anything motivated by lust or love. So if you're going to get married, it's for some strategic, political, or diplomatic reason. It's not for love. It's not for lust. And I'll go through the whole list of Dakato later. We're trying to cover a huge amount in this podcast. It's probably going to need multiple series to do it justice, but this is going to at least help me get the ball rolling. So again, radical honesty is the key, because if you engage with your delusions the way that most people do, like people often engage with their delusions or their wishes or their fantasies, and they honestly can't differentiate those things from real life, well, that'll get you killed in a fight, right? Because you need to know the truth in a fight. You need to know where your opponent is, where his weapon is. It doesn't matter what you want it to be. All that matters is what it is. And so the first step is, like, my mom hates it when I say this because I say it all the time. I say it is what it is. Right, it is what it is, which is a short form of the truth is not what you want it to be. It is what it is. So you must bend to its power or live a lie. So I don't like the fact that I'm getting older, but I'm getting older. If I deny to myself that I'm getting older, then I'm just delusional. I think I'm still young. You need to compensate for your aging and your training and your fighting. I don't like that I'm not the greatest black belt in the world, but I'm not. Right, I know right where I'm at. You have to have a realistic understanding of yourself, a realistic understanding of your enemy. That's why Sun Tzu said, if you know yourself but not your enemy, you will win one war for every war that you lose. If you know both your enemy and yourself, it says if you don't know yourself or your enemy, you will lose every war. If you know your enemy but not yourself, you'll win one war for every war you lose. If you know both your enemy and yourself, you will never lose any wars. So a major part of combat is being able to put yourself in the mind of your enemy. That's why Sun Tzu said to defeat your enemy, you must become your enemy. You must literally be able to think like he can and understand what his capabilities are. And this is also, of course, true for a spy, right? Spying and warfare are intimately interconnected, and Sun Tzu writes quite a lot about intelligence as well. And his stuff on that is really good. So again, you may abandon your honor, your body, but you must never abandon your honor. Sorry, you may abandon your own body, but you must preserve your honor. Now I'm just going through them. Generally speaking, the way of the warrior is resolute acceptance of death. And this is the core. So the practice is you're supposed to meditate every day on dying. So you're literally supposed to close your eyes and imagine getting your head chopped off as visually as you can, as graphically as you can. Imagine yourself getting filled with arrows. Imagine yourself falling off a building and hitting the ground. Imagine yourself being tossed in the waves until you drown. Imagine yourself being impaled and bleeding out. Imagine yourself being trampled by a horse or run over by a car or eaten by a shark. And you're supposed to visualize these things over and over and over every day. Meditate on this until eventually you convince your mind that you are in fact dead. And that is why the way of the warrior is the resolute acceptance of death. Your goal, therefore, is no longer survival. Your goal is simply honor and duty. And your goal is to die without compromising your honor or failing in your duty. In other words, the only thing you have to fear is failure, or the only thing you have to fear is dishonor. Even failure you don't have to worry about, because if you fail honorably, then there's no defeat. The only defeat is dishonor. And following from the previous one, resolute acceptance of death says to win any battle, you must fight as if you are already dead, right? That's why people say there's nothing more dangerous than someone with nothing to lose. When you have something you're afraid to lose, you flinch, you hesitate, you're fearful. When you have nothing to lose, you're extremely dangerous. Going back to the previous one, we said before, it says, in all forms of strategy, it is necessary to maintain the combat stance in everyday life and to make your everyday stance your combat stance. So the stance that you would maintain if you were in a fight, the state of readiness, the positioning of the feet, being on the balls of the feet, not being flat-footed, the distance between the front foot and back foot, the way you angle your lead foot towards your opponent and keep your back foot back. You should keep that position at all times, because you never know when you're going to get attacked. You never know when a fight's going to start. So you should never have to switch between a peace stance and a war stance. Your war stance should be your peace stance. In other words, you should always be in your war stance. So a follow-up of that is the approach to combat in everyday life should be the same. And this one is important, very important. Control your anger. If you have anger towards others, they control you. So rage and anger are never useful. In fact, these are the most destructive things. Fights are lost all the time because people fight in anger. You have to fight with placid, calm, and like detached, rational logic. You have to, the more calm you are, like this is the thing I love the most about martial arts, is it's really about teaching yourself to remain calm and logical in situations that would normally cause people panic. So when someone's on top of you, they're raining punches on you, you can't breathe, they're putting their hand over your face, you can't breathe, they're trying to gouge your eyes out, they're trying to smother you, crush you, and most people would be panicking. And there's 3 F's, like fight, flight, or freeze. A lot of people freeze in those situations. Some will run and panic, and fight in most cases is not a tactical fighting. It's like an impulsive fighting. A warrior is learning to suppress all 3 of those F's and make tactical decisions in situations where other people are not able to do so. I'm just kind of jumping around because I'm going through this. But yeah, control your anger. So you don't want to become angry, because if you become angry, you will inevitably make a mistake, and that mistake will get you killed or make you lose the fight. But the more important part of this teaching is, if you have anger towards others, they control you. Well, reverse that. If you can make other people truly angry at you, then you control them. So I've seen this many times on the server where people become enraged at me, and people like Saigo or other people. And because of that rage, they're so easy to manipulate. And when I say manipulate, I don't mean in some like malevolent way, but your enemy is just childishly easy to predict, and you goad them into becoming more angry. So if they're angry at you, you don't try to calm them down. Continue to make them more angry. If you know there's something about you they don't like, exaggerate those qualities. So if someone calls you narcissistic and they're your enemy, act extremely arrogant, because that will antagonize them further. It's like waving a red flag. Whatever it is they don't like about you, don't try and downplay those things. Exaggerate those things intentionally, because you know it's provoking them. You know it's getting under their skin. It's only a matter of time till they make a mistake. That anger will cause them to make a mistake. So I think I have a Sun Tzu quote. I should have put more of my Sun Tzu quotes here. So far, we've been mostly talking about Miyamoto Musashi. But let's see if I can find this one real quick. Yeah, so this is a follow-up on the other one. It says, when your opponent is hurrying recklessly, you must act contrarily and keep calm. You must not be influenced by the opponent. So all of these sayings have a reverse, right? So you have to remain calm. When your opponent is being reckless, you act calm. But on the same hand, you want to make your opponent become reckless. So here's Sun Tzu. He says, if your enemy is quick to anger, seek to irritate him, right? Sun Tzu says, if your enemy is quick to anger, seek to irritate him. So whatever it is that he thinks is the reason he's mad at you, give him more of that reason, because that's just going to make him more irrational and more ineffective. And following up from that, this is one of the greatest quotes. Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. So what'll happen is people will be fighting against you, and they're doing bad things to you, and you think you have to react, you have to stop them, you have to retaliate. No, that's how you get caught into the spiral. What you do is you just let them do what they're doing and continue to embarrass themselves. It's called the rule of holes, right? If you find yourself, the first rule of holes is if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. But what you'll find is people who don't have discipline, they haven't trained themselves in this way, they can't do that. They put their foot in their mouth, and they're so embarrassed that they put it further in their mouth and further in their mouth and further in their mouth. They dig in a hole. Instead of climbing out of the hole, they just keep digging and digging and digging and going deeper and deeper. So this is why you don't do anything to them. Don't attack your enemy when he's already making a mistake. Just let him make his mistake. Because if you interrupt him, you might actually prevent his tactical error from reaching its full expression. So, for example, if your enemy army is going in the wrong way and they're going into a bad position, you don't want to attack them now. Let them go all the way into the worst possible position before you attack. Only attack when they've finished worsening their own position. Save your energy, right? If they're already defeating themselves, then you don't have to do anything. Whoops. And all you have to do, he says, like, in order to defeat your enemy, make yourself undefeatable, and then he will defeat himself. So you don't have to defeat your enemy. You just have to make sure he can't defeat you. Then he will create the conditions for his own defeat, essentially. And so, for example, like an enemy will give you an opportunity. So when you go into a fight, like if you step onto the mat, you don't just attack your enemy. You don't just think, well, this is the attack I'm going to do, and then do that attack. No, you read your opponent's body. You look at his movements. You look at his foot positioning. You look at the way that he's moving, what he's doing, and you wait for him to give you an opportunity. Because if you think about it, like think of a sword and a shield, like a knight has a sword and a shield. If your opponent has his shield up like this and you just start banging on his shield with your sword, you're not going to get anywhere. You're just wasting your energy. He's got his shield up. So you have to wait until you see an opening. And it's always more effective to counter strike than to strike. So it's always better to wait till your opponent tries to do a judo throw on you. Once he moves, he's no longer in his defensive position. As soon as he tries to throw you, that's when you throw him. If you try to throw him and he's ready for it, then it's maximum exertion on your part for minimum result. If you wait until he moves and then you move just a bit faster, it's minimum result on your part for minimum effort for maximum result. And this just reminds me of one of the most important lessons I've learned in judo and jiu-jitsu and wrestling is never use maximum strength, use minimum strength. People think, oh, the harder I go, the more I'm going to win. No, you should be relaxed. Your whole body should be relaxed, and you should use minimum exertion. And how do you determine what is minimum exertion? Well, in order to defeat your opponent, you don't need strength 10 out of 10. You only need strength plus 1 of him. So if he's giving you strength 6, you don't need strength 10. You only need strength 7. Strength 7 beats strength 6. Why would you waste strength 8, 9, and 10 if all you need is 7? Save every bit of energy that you can. Remember that every fight is a marathon, essentially. Yeah, you can end them quickly. But the most important skill or attribute that you can bring to a fight is called your gas tank or your endurance. Because as soon as there's a quote that says, exhaustion makes cowards of us all. So once you're exhausted, your spirit breaks. It doesn't matter how brave or how strong or what a fighter you are. Once you're exhausted, your will to fight is gone. So all you need to do is preserve your energy while causing your opponent to need to exert more energy than you are. And this doesn't just apply physically, it applies emotionally, right? So if you're having some kind of social conflict with someone, some kind of psychological warfare is going on, if he is at agitation level 5 and you're keeping your agitation level at 1, then simply by doing nothing, he is going to burn himself up emotionally, psychologically. He's running all the wheels in his head. You're living in his head rent free, right? He's mad. He's stressed about you. You're not even caring. You're just chilling out. Then simply by doing that, he's just burning out, right? It's like a candle that's burning 10 times hotter and a candle that's not. Which candle is going to be gone first? And this is why it ties into one of the most profound teachings from Sun Tzu. The first time I read this, I didn't understand it. Now I understand it so well, and I've seen it play out again and again. He says, if you sit long enough by the river, you will see the bodies of your enemies float by. So you don't have to necessarily go out, find your enemies and kill them. You can sit by the river and fish. Sooner or later, the bodies of your enemies are going to float by. Well, how does this work? It doesn't seem to make sense, right? But it does work this way. And this ties into something important. The core of Bushido and the core of the art of war by Sun Tzu is something called Taoism or Taoism. Martial arts are an inherently Taoist enterprise. And so we have to do a whole podcast about Taoism. And prior to the Book of Five Rings and the Art of War, my favorite book was the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tse. And Lao Tse, basically, it's the concept of effortless effort. The eternal warrior is the warrior who achieves without effort. You do less and less to achieve more and more. That's why in the Art of War it says, the supreme art of warfare is to defeat your enemy without fighting, right? And in the Tao Te Ching it says, accomplish that which is difficult while it is easy, right? There's always a point of intervention at which only a nudge is necessary. If you let things go too far, then it requires much more force. And the example I like to use is, if you have a canoe or a ship that's crossing an ocean, you can paddle and use all the strength and you can turn the ship, but it takes a lot of strength. If you just take a finger, you can put your finger in the water on one side and just leave it there, and it's slowly going to curve the ship and you'll end up in a completely different trajectory. So this is the concept of minimum effort. Make your opponent work just a little bit harder than you, and then take advantage of the superior position that you've achieved in order to rest while he cannot rest. If you're resting and he's not, then you're winning, right? And so in my own personal combat strategy, all I try and do is get a dominant position and then maintain that dominant position while resting and causing my opponent to be unable to rest. And this simple process, you don't need to go for a submission. You don't need to go for a kill. You simply make their life more difficult than yours for long enough, and they will ultimately be defeated. And this applies socially, psychologically, as well as physically. Now, this is the core of being a warrior. And this is what I was trying to get at when I said it's kind of like a high responsibility or even kind of risky to be a warrior, because in order to be a warrior, this is Miyamoto Musashi, he says, never accept an inferior position to anyone. Think about that. Never accept an inferior position to anyone. It is the strongest spirit that wins, not the most expensive sword. So what that means is if you're a warrior, in every social situation, in every interaction, in every fight, you must be in the dominant position. Now, it doesn't mean you need to bully anybody, but your spirit must be stronger than everybody else's at all times, right? In every situation, you can never be cowed. You can never flinch. You can never back down. You can never bow your head, and you can never bow your knees or bend your knees unless it is to your master. You bend your knees and bow to your master, but you cannot be cowed, because as soon as you're cowed, you lose. In order to think about this, like, you can think about prison, right? You throw two people in a cell, there's a top bunk and a bottom bunk. Who's going to get the top bunk and who's going to get the bottom bunk? Well, you better not accept that bottom bunk, because the second you've accepted that bottom bunk, you're accepting everything else from that point on. So you never submit, because once you've submitted in one thing, you've submitted in all things, right? And so this is even on the server, right? Like, in order to maintain the order of the server, when there's all these random trolls and chaotic people who want to cause shit, I can never at any time be like, you know what, I just don't have the energy to moderate the room right now. I'm just going to let this happen. Or I don't feel like fighting right now. I'm just going to let this person be toxic. As soon as you do that even once, the whole system is fucked. So you must be just unrelenting and just completely fixated, and only this sort of honor code is going to allow you to do that. Now, it doesn't mean you will always have the strongest will, because obviously you might meet someone who has a stronger will than you, who is a better warrior than you. And when that happens, there's no shame in it. As long as you did your absolute best, you fought your best, then you must also learn to accept defeat with grace, victory or defeat. There's nothing wrong with losing. But the point is, you cannot allow yourself to lose. So I've been in situations where I'm fighting a purple belt, a brown belt, or a black belt, and I know, right, I can't win, right? So this happened when I was at Pacific Top Team. It's a big purple belt. Who was on top of me, and I tried everything I could, every scramble, every bridge, and every shrimp, and every reversal that I knew. And I said, I can't get out. He has me no matter what I do. I've tried everything I know. I've tried grabbing his legs with my legs. I've tried bridge, everything I can do. I know I cannot get out. And he's thinking, well, he knows he can't get out. Most people are now going to give up. They're going to say, I tried everything. I'm tired. Nothing's working. I'm going to give up. I said, I know I'm not getting out, but I'm not going to stop trying. I'm not going to give up. So for the entire time, I just kept fighting until the clock ran out. Now, I didn't win. I didn't allow myself to lose. They call it finding a way out. So you'll see this in MMA. They've suffered so much damage. They're so uncomfortable that they find a way out. They allow themselves to lose. Like, I've been in a situation many times. You're begging to be choked out. You're begging to be put in an armbar, because if you would just get put in an armbar, all you have to do is tap, and they have to let you go, and you've lost. But if they're not even going for that submission, you can't get out. And that's why my strategy of fighting is the most malicious strategy there is, because I don't go for submissions, and I don't go for chokes or whatever. I just put my opponent in the most uncomfortable possible position, and I don't let him out, and I just make it worse and worse. So they literally are begging for you to finish the fight, but you don't. You just make the whole clock run out. You don't let them breathe, blah, blah, blah. Why? Because submissions are difficult. And they're risky. So if you go for an armbar and you get it, it's awesome. But if you miss it, then you've given up your dominant position. So if I'm in a dominant position, like in top control, I'm not necessarily going to shoot for an armbar, because I'm already winning, right? I don't need to finish this fight. I'm already winning. If you can't get me out of this dominant position, I win. So why would I risk my position for this fancy and risky conclusion? All I need to do is be on top, dominate you, show the coach or the ref that I am in the superior position. And at the end of the day, I'm going to be awarded the fight. Now, in an actual self-defense situation, it may or may not be different than that. You may need to finish the fight. But in a tournament, you can just run out the clock. And as long as you are in a dominant position the whole time, you're going to win. So I'm kind of mixing up like personal martial arts tactics with this overall thing. But jumping back to Sun Tzu, it says, the whole secret lies in confusing the enemy so that he cannot fathom our real intent. Sun Tzu says, the art of war is deception. And he says, be extremely obscure, even unto formlessness. He says, let your plans be dark and impenetrable, and then fall like a thunderbolt. So what this is referring to is never telegraph anything. So if you're planning to attack somebody, there should be no indication that you're planning to do so. So a normal person will bark. right? They will make a bunch of noise and shout a bunch of words and make a bunch of declarations of dominance. And I'm better than you. I'm bigger than you. I'm stronger than you. I could fuck you up. Real warrior is not going to say anything like that. Real warrior is not going to say a single word until he kills you. He's not going to put his hand on his sword and be like, hey, back off, man, or I'm going to draw my sword. He's certainly not going to draw a sword and be like, hey, back off, I've got a sword. No, he's going to be like completely calm, completely talking to you like nothing's wrong, and then he's just going to kill you without any warning whatsoever. Whereas, so the expression I use, I've been in like positions like people are trying to, in psych ward or whatever, there's people like prison type dynamics, they're trying to threaten you and stuff, and I just say, listen, dude, little dogs bark and big dogs bite. So because you're barking, I know you're not a big dog, right? If you're barking, you're a little dog. Big dog doesn't need to bark. Big dog bites when he has to, never needs to bark. All that's doing is giving your opponent a warning. And so in the same regard, in fighting, right, what does a non-warrior do when they get in a fight? They let you know, hey, I'm gonna punch you right now. You don't do that, right? Then you're just telegraphing. It's called telegraphing. You only strike, you never telegraph. And if you're telegraphing, it's only to feint, right? So you can pretend you're going to punch and then hit with the other hand, but you never like show him which hand you're going to punch with. And if you are going to do something like this, I'm going to give you a tip. If you ever fight me, if you see me put my hands up like this, I guarantee you I'm shooting a double leg takedown. Because I put my hands up like this, the only reason I'm going to do that is so you're like, oh, he's going to punch me. Then I'm going to shoot down and grab you by the legs, right? And vice versa. If I go like this and I go into a judo stance, and you can tell that I'm setting up for a throw, then I'm going to hit you with an elbow, right? Because the only reason I'm going to show you that I'm getting ready to do a throw is if I'm not going to do a throw, right? Deception is the key to warfare. And so that's why you be dark and impenetrable and then you fall like a thunderbolt, right? There's just no warning, and then there's absolute destruction. You don't even see it coming. By the time your opponent knows he's defeated, like, in other words, he won't even know the fight is over until the fight is over, right? And this is certainly true of like a judo throw. You execute one judo throw, he's going to wake up on the ground. So I tried to read this before. It says, to secure ourselves against defeat lies in our own hands, but the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself. So what this means is I have it in my power to make sure that I don't expose myself to danger or defeat. I can make sure that I secure my perimeter, that I don't open myself up to being attacked, that I don't have any weaknesses in my defense. That's in my power. Then I just watch you and wait for you to show me how you're vulnerable, how you're going to be defeated. You're going to provide that opportunity yourself. Very simple example. If you keep your hands down, right? If you keep your hands down by your hips like a Taekwondo goofball, or you keep your hands down low, then you're providing the opportunity to be knocked out, right? If you simply keep your hands up, then that's not an option. I can't knock you out because you're keeping your hands up. As soon as you put your hands down, I say, oh, that's how you want to lose. So the question is not, how am I going to beat you? The question is, how do you want to lose, right? You'll show me. Did you put your feet together? Oh, then I'm going to sweep you. You didn't keep your feet balanced. Did you not have your hips engaged? Then double leg takedown. Did you let your hands down? You're going to get hit. Did you keep your chin out? You're telling me how you want to lose the fight. On the flip side, I need to make sure that you can't figure out how that I'm going to lose the fight. And that is why Sun Tzu says, the whole secret lies in confusing the enemy so that he cannot fathom our real intent. So that's why I'm saying you put your hands up when you're not planning to punch. You go position yourself in a judo or wrestling position when you're not planning to wrestle, so they can't fathom your real intent, right? Now, on the flip side of the way of the warrior is resolute acceptance of death. This is a quote from Lao Tse, who wrote The Art of War. He didn't write The Art of War. He wrote the Tao Te Ching, which really is the essential essence. The art of war is an expression of the Tao Te Ching. The Tao Te Ching applies in everything, but Master Sun applied Taoism perfectly to the art of generalship. And again, it needs to be said that I call the Book of Five Rings the masterwork of tactics, whereas Sun Tzu's Art of War is the masterwork of strategy. What is the difference? Essentially, tactics is small-scale strategy, and strategy is large-scale tactics. So tactics applies to personal combat, one-on-one, or squad combat, small unit combat. Strategy refers to organizing and mobilizing armies, logistics, leadership. That's generalship. Tactics is the skirmishes, the battles, right? It says you may have won the battle, but you'll lose the war, or we may have lost the battle, but we'll win the war. Well, the battle is tactics, the war is the strategy. A war is a series of battles, and strategy is a series of successful tactical maneuvers. But anyways, in order to be a warrior, you must obviously not only be willing to die, but you must be willing to kill. And if killing is then going to cause you a huge amount of emotional stress and grief, that's only going to impair your future competence and your future effectiveness. So ultimately, if you are in the business of killing, you should try not to be in the business of being too fazed by the killing. So Lao Tzu says, heaven and earth are ruthless and treat the various creatures as straw dogs. The sage is ruthless and treats others as straw dogs. Now, it's interesting. First of all, what is a straw dog? Well, it's like a scarecrow. It's like a dummy made of straw. But so specifically, it was a dummy made of straw that they used for ritual sacrifices. So it was like sacrificing an animal, but it wasn't even an animal. It was an inanimate object. So what he's saying here is you treat other people as inanimate objects. And what's interesting here is he's not saying this is what the warrior does. He's saying this is what the sage does. And a sage means like an enlightened being, a wise person. And this is one of those things that people in our modern, liberal, Western, 21st century culture go, that sounds horrible. That sounds evil, to treat everybody as straw dogs. But the fundamental truth of Buddhism, reality is Maya, illusion, samsara, the matrix. Things are straw dogs. A lot of people are NPCs. And at the end of the day, God is no respecter of persons. Nature is no respecter of persons, right? The sun and the moon, they don't care who they sunburn. The asteroid doesn't care what it crushes, right? Now, again, we conduct ourselves according to an honor code of benevolence, and none of this has to do with being ruthless, being evil, or being cruel. But if the situation is such that you have put yourself in a position where you are forcing me to kill you, then you're a straw dog, right? You jumped on my sword. I'm not going to cry about it. And if you raise your knife at me and I have to kill you, I'm not saying people don't experience PTSD, and all of these things are aspirational. In reality, humans are not built as warriors. You become one. It's a process, and you will go through emotional pain and stuff. And the first time you kill someone, I assume it's quite emotionally difficult, but you become hardened to these things. And that doesn't mean you lose your morality. It just means that you become more and more secure in the execution of your duty. So again, it's not about being evil, being cruel, or being a bully. It's the opposite. It's about being respectful, being honest, being benevolent. And you can tie this all into the Bible as well. And that's my thing, is I'm like a Christian warrior. Holy warrior is what I prayed to be. So what does the Bible say? It says, blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for battle and my fingers for war. So that makes it clear right there. When we do martial arts, even though we're training ourselves, or our coach is training us, or our training partners are training us, we're actually being trained by God. It's God who trains our hands for battle and our fingers for war. And there's another verse that says, wisdom is better than weapons of war, which is true, because wisdom is the greatest weapon you can have. However, one sinner destroys much good. So what it's saying here is, even though wisdom is better than weapons of war, it only takes one person to destroy a huge amount of good. And the best example of this is school shooters. We see this all the time in the modern world. One evil person or one insane person can kill not only a whole classroom or a whole school of children that are innocent, but then also all of their families will be destroyed as well. All of the emotional turmoil is just incalculable. So to not just execute that person would be unconscionable. You have to kill that person, because you can't allow one evil person to do that much damage. That's why you need warriors. That's why you need assassins and SWAT troopers and soldiers. And that's why you should be convicted in your duty without hesitation, without fear, et cetera, et cetera. And all of this is easy to say. It's a lifelong practice to actually develop these abilities or these trainings. And that's why training is the core of being a warrior. One of the most important teachings is, in combat, you either fall to the level of your panic or rise to the level of your training. So a non-warrior is not trained. So when they're put in a position that's outside of their comfort zone, they panic and their abilities degrade. If you're trained, when you're in a panic, there will be no panic. Your training kicks in automatically. You train it to be muscle memory. You just, at a certain point, my opponent's doing this. That means I do this. He's doing this. I do that. It takes all the emotionality out of it, and it becomes a calculus. It's like, that's one of the reasons martial arts is amazing. It has similarities to chess. It has similarities to debate, in the same way that I can defeat someone's logical argument by seeing the weakness in it and then, dominating it through a logical chain that's superior and just enforcing, like, no, this is the truth. What you said is false. People don't like it. In the same way, you're trying to do this. No, I'm doing that. They don't like it. This is what's so funny when a warrior deals with a non-warrior, is they believe that as long as they don't accept reality, they haven't lost. And in discord, in conversation, and debates, people literally think, as long as I don't admit that I'm wrong, I'm not wrong. As long as I don't admit that you're right, I'm not right. As long as I pretend I'm winning, I'm winning. This is why you need to do combat sports, because you'll learn it doesn't work that way. Truth is not what you want it to be. It is what it is, and you must bend to its power or live a lie. And it's much better to accept defeat than to be delusional and convince yourself you're winning when you've already lost. That'll get you killed, for one thing. So we're going to go through a few more quotes. Again, in order to be a general, you are not only a warrior. In fact, you may not really be a warrior at all. Some generals might never take to the field, and yet they win many wars. So generalship also involves the qualities of leadership in general. And so this is important. When one treats people with benevolence, justice, and righteousness, and reposes confidence in them, the army will be united in mind, and all will be happy to serve their leaders. So you cannot rule by fear. You cannot rule by bullying people. You cannot rule by greed. You cannot rule by bribing people. You cannot even rule necessarily by being popular or being liked. You can only rule by truly earning respect and showing people that being loyal to you is in their best interest, right? People will not be loyal to you because it's in your best interest, no matter how much you kiss their ass, how much you bribe them, how much you cajole them, how much you manipulate them, or how much you gaslight them. People will only be loyal to you if it is in their best interest to be loyal to you. So if you're going to be a leader, you must be making other people's lives better by being a leader. And if you want people to accept your authority, you have to prove to them that their life will be better under your authority than without your authority, which is why obviously what would give you the right to have authority? Only that you protect other people who are weaker than you. The only thing that gives you the right to be a warrior is that you use your martial arts to protect people weaker and more innocent than you who are not able to protect themselves. As soon as you become a warrior who is fighting for his own personal gain rather than for the protection of the innocent or for their duty to their emperor or their loyalty to their king, you become what's called a marauder, a raider, or a bandit. That's not a warrior. That's a criminal, right? Warriors are not criminals. Warriors exist because criminals exist. If criminals didn't exist, we wouldn't necessarily need warriors. But a criminal is not a warrior. Even if they fight, even if they're skilled fighters, even if they're capable of using weapons, they're not warriors. They're criminals, because the defining feature of a warrior is honor and following an honor code. An honorless warrior is not a warrior, right? You're only a warrior, no matter how skilled you are at fighting, you're only a warrior as long as you conduct yourself according to the code of Ibushi. Now, going back to Sun Tzu, where he says, deception is the art of war, let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night, and when you move, fall like a thunderbolt. Well, here's a really important one. Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak. Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak. So if you're strong, don't broadcast your strength. Make people think that you're weak. If you're weak, then you need to pretend you're strong. So if you have an injured leg in a fight, you have to pretend your leg is not injured. You have to mask the pain and act like your leg is fine, because as soon as your opponent can tell that your leg is injured, they're going to start targeting that leg. So if the leg is weak, you have to mask that weakness and appear strong. On the flip side, what you could do is pretend to limp with your leg that isn't actually injured, so that your target tries to attack that leg and then is surprised that you move it with full agility and counter his move, or like you put all your weight on it and do a kick with the other leg that he didn't think you could do because he thought you were limping. Just simple deception. But it goes much deeper than that. So if you go back to the round table, the politics, because war is not just combat, it's in social interactions, information, communication, psychology, psychological warfare, information warfare, electronic warfare. All of this is warfare. It's not just physical. It's not just weapons. So in the round table, I never put myself at the top of the roster. I never put the little crown beside my name. I always blended myself in with all the other knight commanders so that a new member joining the server could not tell that I had the amount of power that I had, because people act differently when they know how much power you have. When they know that you have absolute power or significant power, they kiss up to you, they deceive you, they lie to you, they attempt to ingratiate themselves to you, and therefore they deceive you. But if they don't know you have power, they're going to speak much more honestly and reveal much more of their character. So people would often misbehave when I wasn't in the chat room and then act really good when I was in the chat room. So what you want to do is not let them know that you're the server owner. Just appear to be an ordinary person, right? And this is the concept of crouching tiger, hidden dragon. The dragon is the most powerful of all animals. It's never seen. The dragon takes the form of a human being. It doesn't ever show its dragon nature. It doesn't need to, right? It doesn't need to show off that it's a dragon. Its power is so absolute that there's no point in broadcasting it, and broadcasting its power would only diminish its power. So if I have a bunch of guns in my house, it would be foolish of me to show you those guns, because all that does is diminish the use of those guns as weapons. The best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't know you have. But you don't want to broadcast that you have weapons. When you walk around, so you don't want to show people necessarily what you have or don't have. Your weapons should ideally be concealed within the law. Now, sometimes, obviously, it's useful to have a visible weapon for various reasons, right? People might leave you alone, or it might avoid fights if they know that you're armed. But at the same time, the best weapon is the one that your opponent does not know that you have. Now, when it says appear weak when you're strong and strong when you're weak, I'll give you an example of this. So an immature warrior will focus on how they appear, right? They'll want to show you that they're a warrior and be really tough and wear bandanas and have tattoos and like scary jackets. That's how you know someone isn't really that dangerous, because if they really were that dangerous, they wouldn't show it off, right? The true assassin is the guy who's mopping the floor in the corner that you never see coming. The warrior, the true killer, is the one who's just the gentle, calm guy that you don't know can kick your ass. If he's a big bully type dude, then he's got some psychological weakness that he's overcompensating for. And on the flip side of that, right, what I've started doing all my life, I only ever wore like black and green military colored clothing. I've started wearing pink, right? I got these silly pink sunglasses. I'm not sure where I put them, but I got this pink hat and these silly pink sunglasses, right? So everywhere I go, I wear this now, right? And on the one hand, it looks kind of cool or whatever, I guess, depending on your style. But the funny thing about it is, by wearing this pink hat and this pink glasses, people automatically are going to assume things about you. They're going to assume that you're more effeminate or that you're homosexual. People don't expect someone who wears a pink hat and pink sunglasses to kick their ass. They think that someone who wears pink hat and pink sunglasses doesn't want to fight. People who wear pink, you just think they're not going to be martial people. So I intentionally wear a pink hat and pink sunglasses so that people will underestimate me, or better yet, they'll actually try and bully me, right? Someone threw a drink at me when I was wearing this pink hat and this pink sunglasses. I'm quite sure they probably wouldn't have done that had I not been wearing them, because the attitude is probably like, oh, look at this gay dude. He's not going to do shit. And then immediately I'm in his face like, what, motherfucker? Like, what do you want to do about it, right? And he's like, whoa, I didn't expect this at all. So this is appear weak when you're strong. Now, obviously, there's no reason why wearing pink would make you weak, but that's the way people think, right? So, you know, deception. You can pretend to be gay. You can pretend to be injured. You can pretend to be... One thing I did in Winnipeg, murder capital of Canada, is I went around in the middle of the night wearing like homeless person clothes that made me look poor and like dirty. Like I was wearing like homeless person clothes. How did you get so much hair in my mouth? Jesus Christ. My cat like bombed my mouth with fur. But anyways, I put on like dirty clothes, and then I took like a cane and I put my hand on my back and I like limped around and walked around the city so that anyone who saw me would think I was a completely vulnerable target and assume that I was completely helpless. You literally, by limping, by holding your back, people don't expect deception. So if they see someone walking in the night doing that, they literally think that you're helpless and you're vulnerable. That will attract predators. That will attract people who are looking to mug innocent people. Then they're going to be completely surprised when you stand up and all of a sudden you're a young, healthy guy. And that psychological thing is going to completely fuck them up. And that surprise is going to... So one, by showing weakness where it doesn't exist, it's a trap, right? So I've done this with server. You make it look like there's a way to destroy the server. You make it look like there's a way to coup the server, or that there's a vulnerability in the team that doesn't actually exist. One of the most entertaining epochs of the server was back in the round table. We had this guy come in who was a con artist, and he was trying to get us to give us all his money and was telling us he was going to invest it for us, give us all our money, and he was going to invest it for us. And he was talking this huge game. He was an obvious con artist. But instead of calling him out, I talked to my team. I said, here's what we're going to do. Instead of calling them out, I know Dawson remembers this. He was part of it. I said, instead of calling him out and exposing him now, we're going to pretend we're falling for it. And we just strung him along and strung him along. And people would talk to him and be like, yeah, Shogun's a drunk. Nobody likes Shogun. We'd rather have you in charge. But don't tell Shogun we're all secretly doing this. And this guy literally thought he was leading a coup and that everyone was in on it and that he was going to take over the server. And he was completely believing that everything... And meanwhile, we're all laughing our asses off at him, just stringing him along. Finally, we get him in public in front of everybody and just completely roast him and expose him that he's been a fool the whole time, that nobody ever believed a word he said. So again, we could have just called him out at the beginning and been like, hey, dude, we know you're a liar, fuck you. But we did enormously more damage to him by allowing himself to believe that his bullshit was working. And the same thing applies to Saigo, Too High, Corvo, Egg-Based, and Crimson, and all these other people. People go, well, didn't you see it coming? Or, oh, that's so terrible that they betrayed you. It's like, no, this shit's obvious so far in advance, but never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. And a flip side of that is keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So if I know someone's trying to betray me or is my enemy, should I ban them immediately? Well, no, because once I've banned you, you're no longer in my field of vision. If you're my enemy, I'd rather have you right where I can see you. And if I can see you, I can see how you're talking, how you're thinking, and I can chart your whole mentality to have a better understanding, not only of what you might do in the future, but what other people similar to you might do. So one thing I want to point out is friends are great, right? It's great to have friends, and allies are even better, but enemies are usually best of all, right? Enemies can be much more useful than either friends or allies, because enemies give you opportunities that friends cannot. If you're a warrior, one of the things that is most constraining is how few opportunities you actually have to use your skills, right? I can train martial arts all day, every day for my entire life, and I might never get an opportunity to use them. In order to use them, I need an enemy. Like, what is a warrior without an enemy, right? What is a knight without dragons to slay? What is a samurai without opponents? So, and this is another of the differences between a bushi and a normal person. Normal people are terrified of having enemies and terrified of losing friends. They want to keep their friends and they don't want enemies. And if they have enemies, they're stressed out. If you're a bushi, an enemy is like an opportunity from God. It's an opportunity to test your skills. It's an opportunity to unleash the full extent of your abilities that you never normally get. So once someone actually truly transgresses, right? Because obviously if someone just shoves you, that doesn't give you the right to cut their head off. If someone just calls you a dick, that doesn't even give you the right to hit them, right? If somebody does something minor, you have to be the bigger man and not create an unnecessary amount of violence. But when someone truly transgresses, right, truly does something terrible, something unconscionable, crosses that line, and every soldier, every warrior, every fighter, every cop has to know where their line is for themselves. Where's the line when I just say, hey, sir, calm down? And where's the line where I just shoot you in the head? That's a decision you have to make tactically in each situation. There's no fixed line for that because a huge part of fighting is instinct. A huge part of it is intuition. And you must always trust your instincts and your intuition because your instincts and your intuition work much faster than your conscious mind can, and speed wins fights. So if you're thinking, you're losing. That's one of the things that new fighters do is they try and think. They think, well, the technique is this. If you're trying to think about a martial arts technique, it's never going to work. It has to be a thoughtless process. You have to fight with a clear mind and an engaged body, and your muscle memory, etc. has to do the job. Now, anyways, I've been going on for too long, and this is going to have to be multiple podcasts. I just have so much to say about it. But anyways, opportunities multiply as they are seized. So when you're not acting, you're not advancing. Now, this is kind of contrary to the one about if you sit long enough by the river, the bodies of your enemies will float by. You don't want to act for the sake of acting, right? You should always be at rest. If you can rest, you should never move if you don't have to move. However, if you don't seize opportunities, you don't make new opportunities. So when my opponent and I are squared off, he's completely equal to me. We started on our feet. We're both equal. If I do one thing, such as grab his leg and lift it off the ground, that one thing itself may not be that significant, but now he's on one leg. That gives me the opportunity to sweep his remaining leg. So when I seize the opportunity to grab his leg, I multiply the opportunities. Now I have the opportunity to sweep his leg. Once I sweep his leg and he hits the ground, now I have the opportunity to either take full mount or side control. Once I'm in side control, I have the opportunity to do an arm bar or go to north-south. And once I'm in full mount, I have the opportunity to strike, or I have the opportunity to go for a choke. So the point is, be active, right? Always be pushing, always be doing something, always be attacking, not because that attack is necessarily going to work, but because that attack is going to create a response that is going to open up new opportunities. So you're constantly trying to break open opportunities and seize opportunities. You think of like a decision tree, like one line first branches into two branch into four into 8. So the more you act, the more action that you can enact. Similar in a way, victory comes from finding opportunities and problems. And this is like something like people who've known me in my server all the way back to Roundtable. No server and no server owner, as far as I know, has ever been attacked, harassed, betrayed, and fucked with as much as me. I've had a never-ending stream of malicious, dishonest, and malevolent enemies come after me, and never-ending people that betrayed me, and never-ending like crises and problems that people try and create. And people say, oh, like, depending on if you like me or not, people go, oh, poor Shogun, it must be hard to deal with all that. But the reality is, without that, the server would never have grown as quickly as it did. Every single one of those betrayals, every single one of those enemies is a massive opportunity. When you have an enemy, one, you have the opportunity to demonstrate your tactical superiority, right? If nobody tries to attack you, you never get to show that you can defeat people. When you defeat people who attack you, that earns respect, not only for your abilities to defeat them, but also for how you handle it emotionally and so forth. Also, everybody knows people rally around a common enemy. So how do you build a community and make it tight? There's nothing better than enemies. External enemies attacking a community is what binds communities together. People circle the wagon, they rally around the flag. So you want enemies. You don't want to create enemies intentionally. That's not going to be a good idea. But when people genuinely betray you, and this is why the core of it all is honor, because if you don't behave yourself with honor, people will legitimately attack you. And then even if you're defending yourself, you won't be perceived as being in the right because you legitimately provoked them. So what you need to do is conduct yourself on the moral high horse, not the moral high horse, but the moral high road all the time. You have to conduct yourself with honor, never start a fight you don't have to, never start a war at all. Always make peace the first and second option, always extend the olive branch, always try diplomacy. War is the failure of diplomacy, and war is diplomacy by other means, or diplomacy is war by other means. So war is always the last resort, not only because that's what's most ethical, but because that's what's most practical. Because you always want it to be shown that you did not start the fight. And this is why every war must have what's called a casus belli. Casus belli means cause for war. And if you don't have one, you manufacture one. That's what people do in the modern world, which is like false flags and stuff like that. That's evil. You don't want to do that. What you need, though, is a legitimate casus belli. If you don't have a legitimate cause for war, you should not be fighting. The better your cause for war, the more justified that you are, the more likely you are to win, because people will side with you. You'll have more allies. Your allies will be more loyal. Your soldiers will be more loyal. So you want to conduct yourself as a moral paragon, not only because that's the core of Bushido and because that's what's right, but also because the better you behave as a person, the more you will triumph. There's a rule in fighting that you lose every fight that you start. So in bar fights, the guy who starts the fight, who goes up and is like looking for a fight, is always the guy who gets knocked out. The guy who pushes some random person or mouths off, he's the one who gets clocked and gets knocked out. The guy who doesn't start any fights, who conducts himself respectfully, who's restrained and calm and collected, when you push that guy into the corner, that's the guy that's going to fuck you up. So never initiate aggression. Always be in a reactive state, but always be ready. And this is a similar principle on the opposite side. It says, when you surround an enemy, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard. Another translation of this says, use 3 beaters to pursue your quarry. Well, people don't know what that means, but in the old days, if you were hunting, you had things called beaters. So the beaters would run in the bush and like beat the bush to scare the animal in a certain direction. So if you're trying to get the animal, you'd have one beater here and one beater here. And by doing that, you make the animal run in the middle because it's scared of the thing on the one side, it's scared of the thing on the other side. So the 2 beaters put the target exactly where you want it. What Sun Tzu is saying here is don't block his avenue of escape. So don't fully surround your enemy. Now, of course, if you fully encircle your enemy, that's the best way to annihilate him. However, you don't necessarily want to do that, because if you corner an enemy so that they have no avenue of escape, that's when they'll plant their feet and fight the hardest. If you leave one avenue of escape open, even in appearance, they will try to retreat. And a retreating enemy is much easier to defeat than an enemy who's standing their ground. So don't close a wall around them, because then they're going to say, oh shit, this is our last stand. And they're going to put up a ferocious last stand. Leave an avenue and they'll think, hey, if we run this way, we can get away. Then you just chop them down from behind. And this is why courage is one of the most important virtues of a warrior, because once you get your opponents to break and run, they can be destroyed with trivial ease, right? If an enemy is facing you, they can see what you're doing, they can defend themselves. As soon as they turn and run, you just cut them down from behind. That's why when you rout an enemy force, they just get annihilated. It's a full sweep. And that's why holding the line and not breaking and running is so important, because if you break and run, you're going to die. So, you know, if your goal in running is to live, then running is not going to be the right thing to do, unless, of course, you can actually escape. Now, again, we're going to have to stop this soon because it's been going for a long time, and it's definitely going to be a series. But it says here, to know 10,000 things, know one well. And perhaps this is why this might be a good one to stop on. Why does this matter so much, martial arts? Well, because it says, when you perceive the way broadly, you will see it all in all things. And so on the flip side, when you know one thing extremely well, you know everything. So when you focus on being a warrior and you truly understand the way of war, and I'm not saying I or anyone does, right? The greatest martial artist ever to live, even Miyamoto Musashi said, nobody today truly understands the way of the warrior, including himself. But the point is, if you understand the way of the warrior, it applies in everything. It applies in business. It applies in relationships. It applies in academics. It applies in running a Discord server. It applies in anything, right? So become a warrior first. Make that your only and overriding goal, because the same principles, the same strategies, the same tactics apply in everything. That's why business people read The Art of War, mafia bosses read The Art of War. Everybody reads these books because it's not only applicable to war, it's applicable to everything. That's why military is the most interesting field, because other fields create little echo chambers, little ivory towers, where it's like, well, in gender studies, we talk this way, or I love sociology, but in sociology, we talk this way. There's terms of art, there's terms that are respected in this discipline, but aren't necessarily respected in other disciplines. Military stuff isn't like that. It works because it works because it works. And it doesn't depend on other people agreeing with it. It doesn't depend on what's politically correct. It doesn't depend on what people like or dislike. It doesn't depend on what is the current flavor of the day or what the current ideological thing is. Military strategy either works or it doesn't, and it doesn't need your permission, which is why it's the only thing that is truly truthful, because it's the only thing that doesn't require the other person's consent, right? It doesn't require you to convince them. You don't need to convince someone that they've been knocked unconscious. They've just been knocked unconscious. And that is why martial arts and war is the most important of all disciplines, because every other discipline depends on successful martial arts to exist, right? So if I want my dream is to have daughters someday. I don't know if I ever will. I've kind of given up on that because of the Dakato thing, walking alone. But I would like to be a father. And if I was a father, I would know that, yeah, I can teach my daughter piano. I can get her the best piano instructor in the world, the best violin instructor she could go to ballet classes. And I can put all this skills into her, all this resources and all this money. But the second I fail to defend her, all of that vanishes in thin air. All it takes is one crackhead to stab her one time, she dies. One psycho to grab her, she's gone. All that energy is gone. So you cannot build artists. You cannot have poets. Like NSA says, I was a warrior so that my son could be a politician, so that his son could be a poet, right? If you don't build a strong state first, there is nothing else. If you don't defend your house first, there is nothing else. If you don't protect your daughter first, she's not going to grow up to get married. She's not going to have kids. You're not going to have grandkids. So everything else, people say, well, why is it so important to be a warrior? Why don't you focus on something more noble, like being a philosopher or a poet or an artist? Those things aren't more noble. They're less noble, because those things can only exist because warriors exist. Warriors and the defense that they offer to people who are not warriors is the only thing that allows the higher flourishings of society that we all take for granted, like art and literature and everything else. And the second that our military defense is insufficient, we no longer exist. Therefore, the survival of the state depends on warfare. Therefore, it is necessary to study these things well. I'm pretty sure that's actually the very first line in The Art of War. And I want to check if I'm correct about that. If I can find my book. Apparently, yeah, here it is. Let's see if I remember correctly. The very first passage in The Art of War by Sun Tzu, because I believe it is precisely that. Hold on. So The Art of War begins with this. Let's find that. We'll start. So, preface. Long preface. So, this is the very beginning of The Art of War, the very first chapter, the very first line. Military action is important to the nation. It is the ground of death and life, the path of survival and destruction. So it is imperative to examine it. So that's the first line in The Art of War. This line is justifying, why are we even studying war? Why are we going to read this whole book called The Art of War? Because this is the ground of life and death. Without this, nothing else exists. All of your values, all of your philosophies, all of your religion, all of your relationships, all of your happiness, all of your hopes, all of your dreams depends on war. If you fail in war, you cannot succeed in anything else. Therefore, study military, study tactics, study strategy, study the art of war and the art of being a warrior, because only by doing that can you even secure a possibility for anything else for yourself or others. And it is inherently the duty of the strong to use their strength not only to protect the weak, but to become more strong, right? If you are strong, not only are you obligated to defend people with your strength and serve people with your strength, you're also obligated to increase your strength. It is incumbent upon you to become stronger, faster, better controlled, more disciplined, because if you don't, someone evil might do so. And then this is the old axiom, all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Well, you could also say all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to be weak. And in modern society, good men have become weak, as well as most men have become bad. And this is intentional. Satan, the god of this world, is corrupting society. There's estrogen in the food, estrogen in the water, fluoride in the water, fluoride in the antidepressants, SSRIs, surgically removing people's testicles and gonads, giving people cross-sex hormones, estrogen. Well, how does this tie into transgenderism stuff? All I'm saying is there's an overall agenda to reduce male virtues, to not teach men what in the past every boy would have been expected to be a warrior, to learn the manly virtues of fighting and strength and woodsmanship and hunting and fishing and all these things, and especially to be a warrior. In the past, to be a man and to be a warrior in many cultures were synonymous. In many cultures, you only became a man when you killed your first enemy or survived your first war. And if you weren't capable of being a warrior, you weren't really a man. Now, today, they teach you, oh, don't be violent. Violence is bad, right? And that's one thing I want to get across. People have been brainwashed to think that violence is bad, that violence is synonymous with evil. It's not. Violence is entirely contextual, and the context is honor. Honorable violence is righteous. Dishonorable violence is evil. So therefore, what are examples of honorable violence? Well, the policeman who's stopping a school shooting, the soldier who's defending his nation from an invading country that's planning to kill everybody, the honorable martial arts competition, contest of wills, training. And when you do this kind of honorable violence, you protect yourself and others from dishonorable violence. And when you study warfare and you study strategy, you're not more likely to get in fights, you're less likely to get in fights. And again, the greatest general wins without fighting, and the supreme art of war is to subdue your enemy without combat. So if you don't want to fight, study the art of war. If you don't study the art of war, you're going to end up having to fight for your life. If you're good enough at the art of war, you'll never fight a day in your life because you'll defeat every enemy before they're ever in a position to attack you. Not only that, they'll probably never even know you defeated them. And I'm going to finish soon with a Warhammer 40,000 thing again. In Warhammer 40,000, there's a number of schools of assassins called clades or temples, and they're based on different schools of warfare. So Eversor is like a psychological terror one that uses massive slaughter and butchery to psychologically traumatize the opponents into submission. So it's like terrorism, basically. That's called the Eversor. There's the Calidus, who use maximum deception, so they're capable of being perfect chameleons, infiltrating, getting close to their target, totally blending in, and then striking unexpectedly when you think this is like your best friend. You think this like they're one of you, and all of a sudden, no, it's like a shape changer, and they kill you. It's deception. You have the Vindicare, one shot, one kill. They're the best snipers in the world, so they can hit you from 1,000 miles away with one shot, one kill. You never see it coming. That's the Vindicare. You have the Venenum, who have mastered all the arts of poisoning. So they can poison your food, poison the air, poison the chair you're sitting on. You'll never even know. You'll sit down on your chair. Oh, they poison your chair. You're dead. But out of all the schools of assassin, there's the Culexus. I'm not going to get into that because it's esoteric. Basically, they're spiritual assassins. But out of all the systems of assassination, by far the best is, and the one that I emulate or practice, is called Vanus assassin. Vanus are information assassins. So they can kill their opponent only by manipulating information and communication, simply by the words they speak, or not even speaking, the things they type, or even just thoughts. Like just by manipulating information and communication, they cause their target to destroy themselves or be destroyed by someone else. And they say the cleanest kill is the one that someone else makes on your behalf without knowing that you even incited them. So not only will the target not know that you're the one who killed them, the person who killed them for you will not even know that they were influenced to do so by you. So how does this work? I'll just give you one example. You could simply put certain information out into the internet that allowed the enemy of your enemy to know where to strike your enemy. So you just release, say, pictures of his base from above. Then someone who's the enemy of your enemy sees that and uses that information to attack your enemy and kill your enemy. You didn't kill your enemy. All you did was post this picture of what the enemy's defenses were. But because you posted this picture, obviously from an anonymous account or whatever, you providing that information caused someone else to do what they were trying to do anyway. So even if someone looked into it, they would never make any connection between you and this assassination. They would say, here's a better example. Let's say you wanted to kill a particular person, and that person was engaged in infidelity, and you just arranged to accidentally leak that this person was cheating on their husband with another man, and that caused that person's lover to then shoot that person because you allowed them to know that this man was sleeping with their wife. So the person who actually killed the person is the man who was getting cheated on, not you. And also, he doesn't even know that you're the one who told him that he was cheating on his wife. So you didn't kill anybody. You literally sit at home, you say some words or release some information. If you have a sophisticated enough understanding of other people's psychology, cause and effect, and chains of logic, then you can allow someone else to kill your target for you. And obviously, I'm not advocating violence or anything of the sort, but this is about war. It's about strategy. I'm not advocating any kind of crime. We're just talking about tactics in a thought experiment kind of way. But it's even more than that. It's not about just like incentivizing or subconsciously gaslighting or manipulating someone into doing your duty work for you. It's also about allowing other people to destroy themselves simply by the way that they broadcast information about themselves. And this is where you come back to, how do you become the best warrior? Conduct yourself with honor. Don't do anything bad. Don't tell any lies. Do everything sincerely and be transparent and integral. Then other people will use deception against you. So again and again, nobody can, beat me really in debate necessarily. Not like I can't lose a debate, but it's hard for people to take me on intellectually. Nobody really can take me on physically. Of course, there are people who can, but usually they can't. They can't control the server, the perms, and that. So what weak enemies do when they attack strong enemies, they say, well, we can't outsmart him, we can't outfight him, we don't have any power to speak of. The weak enemy will resort to slander. They will resort to lies, because lies and slander are the weapons of the weak. But as we said, your honor is your bond, and loyalty depends on honesty and so forth. So what you do is conduct yourself with integrity. Other people will resort to slander. Then you simply show what they did was dishonest, and that will destroy them. You didn't destroy them at all. They destroyed themselves. So this Crimson thing, and I hate to use it, but it's a great example. He tried to extort the community. As soon as he did that, he lost all moral credibility and therefore destroyed himself. He was trying to attack me by extorting money from me. That was supposed to somehow give him an advantage. But due to a lack of any tactical insight, he actually destroyed any tactical advantage he might have had, because as soon as you forfeit the moral high ground, you forfeit all sympathy. The boy who cried wolf is an understatement, right? You cry wolf one time, everybody runs to help you. If they find out that you were lying, nobody's going to run to help you when the wolf actually does come. Even worse, if you lie about someone else and you slander them, and then it's found out that you did, then no one will believe anything you said, and no one will respect you, and no one will like you. So in other words, the best way to defeat your enemies is, one, don't create enemies in the first place. Two, never compromise your own honor so that you never lose the moral high ground. Because once someone loses the moral high ground, they essentially have destroyed themselves, because they can no longer hold the loyalty of anybody else. And if you can't hold the loyalty or the trust of anybody else, you're not going to be able to win any wars, command any armies, or have any comrades in arms. You're going to alienate yourself completely, and you're essentially going to reap what you sow. And so there's an interesting parallel between the biblical philosophy of warfare and the Taoist philosophy of warfare. The Taoist philosophy of war says, by doing less and less each day, you will eventually arrive at accomplishing everything by doing nothing. This is totally paradoxical to the Western mindset, which thinks that in order to achieve anything, you must exert effort, you must be busy, you must be active, time is money, go, go, go. The Taoists figured out a long time it's often the opposite. You achieve more by doing less. Think of your face. People get like one zit, and they're like, oh, I got to pick at this zit, and pretty soon they fuck their whole face up. And if they just left it alone, it would have healed, right? So people get in a fight and they think they have to do a whole bunch of shady, dirty shit, and they're just digging a hole deeper and deeper. So don't start fights. Don't make enemies. Don't compromise your honor. Don't compromise your own defense. Don't give people an avenue to hurt you emotionally, psychologically, or socially. And then if they try to, they will open up the avenue for their own destruction. And this is how warfare is both ethically and strategically optimal. So I'm going to try and close it there, but I'm going to see if we can perhaps find a quote that would summarize this. So one that I just want to say, I don't remember how I said this yet. It says, the purpose of today's training is to defeat yesterday's understanding. This is another good one. Another version of this is, today you defeat your opponent so that tomorrow you can defeat a stronger opponent. It says the victory over yourself today is the victory over your opponent tomorrow. So your real opponent is always yourself, right? Your enemies are not your opponents. They're just training partners. Even in real life, even if people try and kill you in real life, even if you fight actual wars, as a warrior, your only real enemy is always yourself. And the people who think that they're your quote unquote enemies are really just opportunities for you to develop your own Bushido, your own martial qualities. So just always remember, enemies are a gift and war is a blessing, right? Because only in the forge of war can you become strong. And I guess where I'll close is by the metaphor of a sword. Miyamoto Musashi was the greatest swordsman ever lived. Hattori Hanzo, I think, actually might have been the name of a fictional character from Kill Bill. But there is Masamune. Masamune is the real version of Hattori Hanzo. So Masamune was the greatest swordsmith that ever lived. Now, the greatest warrior that ever lived and the greatest swordsmith that ever lived, or in other words, the greatest sword that can ever be made, there's something similar here. The hotter the fire that you make the sword in, and the more hammer blows that you put it on, the stronger the sword is, the better that weapon is. And in the same way, the warrior who puts himself in the most discomfort, puts himself through the most pain, the most training, the most competition, the most fighting, the most difficulty, is the strongest fighter. And when I prayed first, my prayer to God was, God, let me be a holy warrior in your cause. But now I changed my prayer. I don't say that anymore. Now I say, God, make me a sword in your hand. Right? It's an evolution, because a warrior still is in charge of what he does with his sword. But a true samurai isn't in charge of what he does. He's completely loyal and completely obedient. And so the first and most important thing is, if you're going to be a warrior, who are you going to serve? Because if you're a warrior for the wrong master, you shouldn't be a warrior at all. And the only person or entity that truly deserves your loyalty is God. So if you're going to be a warrior, you should be a warrior for God. And if you're going to be a warrior for God, then you should just be a sword in God's hand, because it's not up to you who dies and who lives. So my prayer is, God, let me strike down who you will to be stricken down, and let me spare who you will to be spared. Thy will, not mine, be done, God. Because as soon as I'm using my sword to do my will, then I become a tyrant. You live by the sword, you die by the sword, and you might damn your soul by killing someone, committing murder. So if you're going to be a warrior, you must have no will of your own. You must only have duty and honor. And only in death does duty end. And only in honor can you remain a bushi. As soon as you forfeit your honor, you become a bandit or a criminal. So your honor is your life, your word is your bond, and live each day as though you were on the battlefield, and you will become strong. So every day when you wake up, armor up, gear up. Pack your bag like you're going to war. Make sure you have all your tools and tactics ready. I never leave home without the Art of War, the Bible, and the Book of Five Rings in my backpack. I never leave home without at least 2 weapons. I never leave home without a first aid kit. I never leave home without a water bottle. I never leave home without X, Y, Z, everything that you would need, just like you would never go to war without all that equipment, because you don't know when the war is going to start. The war has already started. There's a war outside that no man is safe from. War is the perpetual condition of life. Peace does not exist. Peace is an illusion. And if you believe in the illusion of peace, you will become weak. If you believe in the reality of war, you will become strong. So do not even seek peace. Do not even wish for peace. Only wish to be the best warrior you can be. And on that point, I'll close. It says, it is better to be a warrior in a rose garden. It is better to be a warrior in a rose garden than a gardener in a war. Right? So a warrior can sit and enjoy a rose garden and look at the flowers, and just as well as anybody else, he's not deprived of the pleasures of peace by being a warrior. But someone who spends all their life cultivating flowers is completely helpless and overwhelmed and distraught as soon as conflict breaks out. So become a warrior, make yourself strong enough for that most difficult and demanding of activities, and everything else will seem easy and stress-free by comparison. People wonder why I'm unfazed by, someone trying to betray me on a Discord server. Well, I'm used to people trying to kill me, choke me out, break my arms, break my limbs. You think I care what happens here? Not in the same way that they do. So this is why the advantages of the warrior path are just innumerable. And at the end of the day, being a warrior is not about winning fights, although, of course, that's a big part of it. Being a warrior is a path of self-improvement leading on to enlightenment and ultimately onto salvation. It is a way. So when we say Bushido, that do doesn't just mean like a tactic. It means a path of life. Miyamoto Musashi said there's more than one way to the top of the mountain, and the way of the warrior is one way to the top of the mountain. Other people do it through meditation, right? Like the Buddha. He wasn't a warrior, but he made it to the top of the mountain through meditation. Miyamoto Musashi chose a different path. That's why he's called the sword saint of Japan. He wasn't just a master swordsman, he's a sword saint. And you can become a saint through combat. We also have Christian saints like Saint Christopher and the other patron saint of soldiers, as well as Archangel Michael and Jesus himself. So I guess the final thing I want to say is, don't believe the lies that Christianity is a pacifist religion. It is a warrior religion through and through. It says, blessed be the Lord, my rock, who blesses my hands, trains my hands for battle and my fingers for war. And of course, Jesus said, he who has no sword, let him sell his cloak and buy one. So Jesus himself said, if you don't have a sword, sell the clothes off your back to get a sword. So if you're a Christian, you don't have a sword, you're not listening to Christ, you're not following Christ. And if you have a sword and you don't know how to use it, that's just foolish. So every single Christian needs to have a sword or the equivalent of a sword. Every single Christian needs to train and know how to use that sword, because every single Christian is called to participate in the final battle between the dragon and the saints. The dragon, the Antichrist, and Satan are going to wage a war against the saints, and Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God, is going to wage war against them. And it says that those who are with him will be called and chosen and faithful. So we are supposed to fight alongside Jesus Christ in the final battle against Satan and the Antichrist. And you can't just jump into doing that. You should be preparing now for the future war. So again, they're going to try and make us take the mark of the beast. They're going to kill and persecute us, and we should be preparing for that. And so, Bushido. That being said, thank you guys. I know that was a long one. It was a little bit rambling, it jumped around, and I'll definitely make this into a series, and future episodes will be more coherent, because this allowed me to start thinking about it and formalizing it. But I hope you guys got something out of it. I hope you appreciated it. And again, whether you're a samurai or a warrior or not, all of these skills and all of these abilities are extremely valuable, and all of these virtues are extremely valuable for everybody. And I'm just going to read this last quote that I didn't read yet from Sun Tzu. Be extremely subtle, even to the point of formlessness. Be extremely mysterious, even to the point of soundlessness. Thereby, you can be the director of the opponent's fate. That's Sun Tzu. Now, I want to mention one last thing. The Book of Five Rings is divided into chapters, which are each called books. And it goes like the Book of Earth, the Book of Air, the Book of Water, the Book of Fire, and the Book of Void. And so the final penultimate art of war is void. Now, I can first of all explain a little bit about what this even means, that they have these different titles. Basically, it says, if you are in defense, be immovable like a mountain. When raiding and pillaging, be like a burning fire. The fire moves around and burns up anything that's dry, and anything that's weak is burned up. So when you're raiding and pillaging the countryside, be like a raging fire. When you're defending the fortress, be like an immovable mountain. But the ultimate art of war is void, right? More powerful than any of the elements is void. So it's basically saying when you are unknowable, when you are inscrutable, when you are mysterious and enigmatic, when your motivations, intentions, desires, strengths, and weaknesses are unknown to your enemy, then you control your enemy, right? So by being invisible, not physically invisible, but socially and spiritually invisible. When people don't really know what it is you want, they don't know what to use against you. So be inscrutable in combat and treat every day as though you're in combat. And remember that there are many ways to deceive, and they don't require lying. Deception and lying are not the same thing. A warrior doesn't lie. Lying is dishonorable. But deception is an entirely different thing. Deception is the way of war, and deception is not dishonorable. So I'm going to conclude there. And I'm just going to conclude by reiterating the 7 virtues of Bushido, which are honor, respect, integrity, courage, honesty, duty and loyalty, and compassion. And all of this can be put under the framework of benevolence. Benevolence is wanting what is good for others, wanting to do what is right for others, wanting to minimize the suffering of others and maximize the happiness of others. That is the core of Bushido. If you don't have that, you're not a warrior, you're a criminal. So start by loving humanity, start by loving the people, start by loving what is good, then learn how to defend it, right? And that's what Bushido is. So you must be benevolent, and then you must be strong, and you must be honorable, and then you can be a Bushi, and then you can live the path of Bushido. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it very much. Thank you, Shea Gorath, for recording. And please check out the new channel in the server called Bushido, where you will be able to read many of the quotes that I read today, and I will be adding to that. We'll also do listen together events on the Book of Five Rings and the Art of War. And in the future, we'll also review another book called the Hokkaido, which is the Book of the Samurai. I didn't want to try and cram that one in because this was already way too much for one podcast. That being said, keep an eye on the announcements channel. We have like 4 events a day coming up for the next 2 days. And most importantly, make sure you have subscribed to the official Temple Mount YouTube channel. It's a great channel. It's got great podcasts on it, and we're updating it every day. There's tons of new stuff coming out. So if you miss an episode or you want to listen to it again, make sure you've subscribed to the Temple Mount channel. And of course, most importantly, join the Temple Mount Discord server where we record this podcast every day. Now, that being said, let's all please jump to the Templar Tavern so that we can socialize and relax for the rest of the night. But again, I really appreciate you guys listening to this, and I hope it benefits you. You guys are my family, you're my community. And so the stronger that all of you are, the stronger we all are together. So it's in my interest that each of you be the best warriors that you can be, because obviously a community of warriors defending one another is much better than one warrior defending a community. So if you just like, I want to defend my children, but more importantly, I want to train them to defend themselves. I want to defend my community, but most importantly, I want to train it to defend itself. I can't always be there. I have to sleep. I won't always be there for my daughters. They'll be alone sometimes. So they need to know how to fight for themselves. You guys need to know how to fight for yourselves. I'm not saying you don't. For all I know, some of you are better warriors than I'll ever be. Nevertheless, I hope this episode has helped in some way. That will conclude this podcast. God bless. And whatever you do, don't take the mark of the beast. See you in the Templar Tavern.